And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Well, the Russia-Ukraine talks are on in Turkey starting tomorrow. There will be a U.S. delegation led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. But there were reports, including in Reuters just this afternoon, that Vladimir Putin will not be in attendance, although a Russian delegation will be. Fox News' Alex Hogan has more details.
But I don't know if he's showing up. I know he would like me to be there. And that's a possibility.
President Trump teasing a possible appearance at peace talks between Ukraine and Russia scheduled for Thursday in Turkey. But it's still not clear if Russian President Vladimir Putin will be there. His Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, is planning to wait in the Turkish capital for Putin to arrive, saying it's his final chance to show he's serious about a ceasefire.
An end to the war is needed, a dignified and just one. Russia talks a lot about direct negotiations, but when it comes down to it, they hide.
These talks are seen as a key moment for the peace process. Negotiators have been working for weeks to set an agenda, but it could all collapse if Putin doesn't show up.
You know, we've already got what we call the term sheet. The term sheet means these are the areas that we think they need to negotiate, they need to talk. And if we can get to this, we can get peace.
But even as the U.S. and European allies try to end the war, both Russia and Ukraine are prepping for summer campaigns on the battlefield. And while the Ukrainian army is thought to be suffering from a lack of new recruits, Putin claims Russia's military is getting 50,000 to 60,000 new volunteers every month.
While the Kyiv authorities are engaged in forced mobilization, catching people on the streets like stray dogs, here our guys go voluntarily.
Zelensky says he will meet with Turkey's president and wait for Putin. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also expected to participate in these talks. In London, Alex Hogan, Fox News.
Alex, thanks so much. So multiple outlets reporting Putin will not go to Turkey for these talks here. I want to put this up from Bloomberg, saying Putin named a group of low-level officials to represent his government at talks with Ukraine and Turkey and gave no indication that he planned to join the negotiations. Well, we have a preview from Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, about what to expect in Turkey. Let's listen.
Дорогі українці і українки, коротко про сьогодні. Я хочу подякувати нашим захисникам неба за захист від шахедів, від усіх інших ударних дронів. Більше сотні шахедів було в ніч на цей день. Значну кількість збито. Не всі, але кожне збиття зберігає наших людей, зберігає нашу інфраструктуру. Були ракети сьогодні, російська балістика. Коли увесь світ чекає від Путіна простої відповіді «так» на пропозицію прямих перемовин, він продовжує бити по Україні. Жодного військового сенсу в цьому немає. Це зрозуміло. Нічого йому це не дає і не дасть. Росія тільки затягує війну, затягує ці вбивства, і кожна країна, кожен лідер, які зараз тиснуть на Росію, заради того, щоб все ж припинився вогонь, щоб все ж були нормальні, змістовні перемовини на рівні, який дозволяє ухвалити рішення кожному, хто допомагає миру, допомагає дипломатії. Я хочу дякувати. Сьогодні була дуже важлива заява папи Римського Лева XIV про готовність Ватикану до посередницької роботи. Ватикан може допомогти дипломатії. Є підтримка прямої зустрічі від лідерів країн глобального півдня. І цей голос звучить. Знаємо також позицію Китаю щодо припинення вогню і перемовин. Абсолютно чітка позиція Америки і Європи. Фактично, зараз найбільш очевидно для всіх у світі, за весь час повномасштабної війни очевидно, що єдиною перепоною для встановлення миру є відсутність чіткої волі Росії це зробити. Сьогодні ми провели кілька нарад з командою щодо формату в Туреччині. Я очікую, хто прибуде від Росії, тоді буду визначати, які кроки варто робити Україні. Сигнали від них у медіа поки непереконливі. Але ми чуємо також, що президент Трамп розглядає можливість бути в Туреччині. Тож це може стати найбільш сильним аргументом. Тиждень дійсно може змінити багато, але може. Зараз все це вирішується. І я хочу відзначити наших воїнів. Це дуже важливо в цей час. Були доповіді сьогодні головкома Сирського по ситуації на фронті, на усіх напрямках. Щодобово більше сотні боїв, особливо важкі. Покровський напрямок, інші напрямки на Донеччині. Ми продовжуємо наші активні дії на Курщині та у Білгородській області. Ми захищаємо превентивно українське прикордоння. Але всі бойові дії – це не наш вибір, це наша оборона. Оборона проти окупанта. Відповіді на всі питання про цю війну. Чому вона почалась? Чому вона триває? Всі ці відповіді в Москві. Як війна закінчиться, залежить від світу. Україна готова до будь-яких форматів перемовин, і ми не боїмося зустрічі. Завтра в Туреччині. Слава Україні!
All right, there you have it. Volodymyr Zelensky with somewhat of a preview. Hal, thanks for being with us yet again on this topic. It seemed like, according to Zelensky, there were some details that were, still in flux as everyone has their eyes now toward tomorrow in Turkey there. But like we reported, it looks like Vladimir Putin will not be there. And I want to ask you this. The symbolism of his absence, will it redound to the benefit of Ukraine and ultimately to the United States to convince people in the Trump administration, maybe the president himself, Putin's not serious about ending the war?
I think what we're seeing here is it's really calling, as some have said in Europe, it's calling Putin's bluff. And I mentioned not only is Putin not showing up, all right, he's sending a low-level delegation. Lavrov, his foreign minister, isn't even showing up. Interesting, our equivalent, Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, will actually be in Turkey, all right? That is our lead on what was hoped to be a leader-to-leader negotiation. And so they're sending a low-level delegation. But I think for Russia, in Russia's mind, the reason they're sending a low-level delegation is they don't really care about this or not really serious about doing a ceasefire. It's just more of the same. And what I found interesting was that the leaders, major leaders in Europe, immediately when this came out that it was clear that Putin wasn't going to be there, they jumped all over it and basically put out that message, which is this says something about, that it says something about Putin. He's not serious about a ceasefire. He's definitely not serious about any peace negotiation. He doesn't really want to end the war. It doesn't mean he wouldn't want to pause it for tactical advantage on the battlefield, but he doesn't want to end the war, and he's still pursuing those maximalist goals of taking over Ukraine. And frankly, when you listen to some of the things coming out of Moscow, they've been restating those maximalist goals as late as Monday. They were saying the same thing, that that their goal is to take over Ukraine. And some of it, we hear it and we think, okay, it's just overcharged Russian rhetoric, more propaganda they put out. But that actually does kind of reflect their thinking. And the other part I want to point to is Putin sees the campaign in Ukraine differently than certainly I would, or a lot of Western observers, military background look at it. He seems to think that he's winning, that he's going to somehow pull this off. And everyone else looking at this saying it's going to be a stalled, difficult summer.
Yeah.
There won't be a lot of movement. And I'll give you an example. The report where it talks about, Russia saying, we got all this manpower and Ukraine is having a tough time. You heard Putin talking about how they have to kidnap people off the street like dogs or whatever to get them into the service. That is actually they do stop people. I mean, and Russia does the same thing. They do try to find folks trying to avoid conscription or avoid service. But with that, the Ukrainians have actually turned around a lot of their manpower problems. Yeah, they're a smaller military overall, but they've turned around a lot of the manpower problems, and they've really been addressing that. The other thing they've been doing very well is they've been training their people. And so when they put them on the front line, these are well-trained troops. These are not just someone who got pulled into service and a month later is on the line. The Russians, on the other hand, they're still doing that. I was reading stuff as recent as this weekend that the Russians are still pulling people, into service, and literally within 4 weeks or a little more, they're on the front lines.
Okay.
And when that happens, you just and they take horrendous slaughter when they hit the battlefield. And for Putin, that's perfectly acceptable. He has not shown to flinch at all at that.
All right, Hal Kemper, we're going to have to leave it at that. We're almost at the top of the hour. Hal, thanks so much for your insight. I'm sure we'll be talking tomorrow to see what comes of these meetings.